All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Taylor. We really appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a very, very busy schedule.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I always like to start off with asking just kind of how you got into the behavioral health space. I find most people have a weird or interesting story about how they got here.
Yeah, I actually started off my career as a pre-K teacher in Texas. I taught pre-K for 8 years, and behavior is the name of the game in pre-K. I was mostly teaching general education classes, but it really doesn't matter, especially with kids that age. I eventually became a third grade teacher, fourth grade teacher, assistant principal, and principal. But when I was an assistant principal, I was at a campus mostly in charge of behavior that had, for lack of a better term, different types of behavior units. So, autism classrooms, more general behavior classrooms. And that's really how I fell in love with working with behavior kids. It was like it or not, you're going to be working with them, but working with them, working with their parents, and then eventually worked for Chancelight, which provides a whole range of different behavioral health services.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So your current work, you work closely with superintendents and special education directors and often under a lot of pressure, I assume. What do you think most people outside of the system kind of misunderstand about the biggest challenges right now in the space?
Yeah, there's a few key challenges that most people, even some people that work in education, don't really understand. Obviously, budget limitations are always going to be a part of this, but if you're talking about providing an entire range of services, because we may be talking about behavioral health, but that could mean autism classrooms, classrooms for students with intellectual developmental disabilities, could be just emotional behavioral disorders. It could be an entire range of different services that a district needs to provide. It all costs money. And so with budget constraints, especially I work in 8 different states, I think every single one of them has those challenges. I don't know that people always connect the dots between budget challenges that they may hear on the news into how that actually impacts students and families at the end of the day. So that would be one. I personally think that special education director is the toughest role in all of education. In fact, in the last couple of years, I've just noticed an incredible amount of turnover in that space because they're getting hit from all angles. And they have parents demanding, and in many cases, rightfully demanding, a certain level of service for their child. They have staffing challenges, they have budget challenges. I know of one district that's had a BCBA position posted for the last 2 or 3 years with no qualified applicants. So it's not for lack of trying, but they're getting hit from all angles. From the parents, the teachers want more support, the parents want more support, the superintendents want you to use less budget, and you're the man or the woman in the middle getting hit from all different directions. And unfortunately, there's a ton of turnover in that space because of that. If you want to be a special ed director and you have some experience, there are job openings everywhere.
I bet. I bet. But who wants the headache, right? Which is the problem.
It's tough.
It has to be a passion for you, I think, for you to take that job.
A lot of passion and the right personality to where you know people are going to be upset with you and you have to do what's right by your district and right by kids. And it's a very tough job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to shift gears a little bit to talking more about the students. When you see a student successfully transition back into a more standard classroom environment, what tends to be kind of the key factor that makes that possible in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with a range of districts. We work with districts from that have over 100,000 students to just a few thousand students. And so I think one thing that's important to note about most of the, not always, but most of the programs I'm setting up are often kids that would be sent to a clinical setting, day treatment type place. We're actually serving them with our staff, but inside a district facility. So we run the entire program. It's not like typical contracted staff who we would turn over to the district. In this case, it's mostly like they give us a wing of a school and we operate the entire program. So when we're looking at kids that have made enough progress to go back to the district, a lot of what is important about if that's going to be successful is what programs the district has. So we're going to have all types of data. We take behavior data every 15 minutes throughout the course of every day. We have a ton of data on what's working, not working for the kid. But if the district doesn't have high quality self-contained classrooms for these kids to go to, maybe we're going to keep them longer and think twice about it. But some of the larger districts that I have excellent programs. They've just exceeded their capacity in some cases, and the kids come to us. But it's much easier to shift them back because the district already has a full continuum of support. So I think that's the main thing is what is the district able to provide and continue to provide when we send the kids back?
Absolutely. And it's different, I'm sure, for every district, every school, every program within every school.
Absolutely. I work with some districts, even though they have quote unquote behavior classrooms, all the staff have quit. They've got some paraprofessionals in there. So yeah, the kid's ready to transition back, but is that something the parent's going to agree to or what's going to be best for that kid? Probably not.
Absolutely. And it makes complete sense. So, because we are an agency, we're a marketing agency that specializes in this space, I always have to ask some of the more marketing questions. The first one is, how do you go about gaining new district partners, new clients for your organization? It seems like a very complicated sales process, marketing, advertising process.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a long sales process. Sometimes it can be over 2 years. And I really don't even think about it as sales. It's way more project management, I guess, because we're having to think about a physical space, working with the technology department, food service, transportation. It's all the logistics that you're going to have to figure out. So it's a lot for a district to take on. And a lot of districts, especially I work from Texas all the way to Georgia in 8 states, a lot of them don't even know that companies or programs like what I do even exists. So a quick email, a quick video often doesn't really do the job. So I favor more personal conversations, sometimes at a conference. Sometimes we'll sponsor special education conferences where I can get a quick 3, 5 minutes to explain what we do. And I found that the interest goes through the roof in terms of people understanding what we do, visualizing what it could look like in their district. However, emails and flyers, things like that, it's too complicated of a product to really just say, "Here you go, do you want it?" It takes some really in-depth conversations, and I think conferences, in-person conversations, and then trying to turn those into meetings where we can really discuss the challenges that the district's having is the most effective way. So there's no silver bullet. It really takes just a lot of pounding the pavement. And then once you have programs and set up in an area, word of mouth, we work through the state departments of education in some states. People know about us. We're all over the place in California. People will come to us there. But in other states where we're new to the market, it's a totally different world. Like people will even ask me, like, is this even legal? I'm like, yes, we do it in like 20 states.
Yeah, all of our 80 clients haven't gotten sued. This works.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. Yeah, and I think that's the case with a lot of what I would say more partnership modeled services, right? You don't just deliver a simple service that they can pick up at the front door. Most of those partnership services are so complex that it's hard to communicate. Like I said, you can't use a flyer almost ever, which makes complete sense. So, what is one maybe new marketing tactic that you are either considering or watching really closely in the marketplace right now?
So I don't know that I would really consider it marketing, but I think it kind of goes back to it being a difficult product to market is working through state departments of education and establishing pilot programs because at this point most states have some type of initiative in finding better ways to serve the kids that we're talking about. They realize that it's a problem. They realize their districts don't have the resources. So right now I'm in the process in the state of Arkansas setting up a pilot program that is going to be very closely watched by the State Department of Education. They're helping to pay for it. And then from there, it becomes, assume we have to do a good job with it, but it becomes much easier to roll that out to other districts with that state support. It also cuts down on a lot of the funding sticker shock because, once again, providing great services is not cheap. So I don't know if I'd really consider that marketing as much as a way to, it's not marketing in the traditional sense, but it is a way to grow our influence and work with people who are influential in the various different states that I work in.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I'm personally a very big fan of marketing that isn't marketing.
Yeah.
I think people get really tired of getting the bombarded cold emails or massive ads on every website. I think proving your concept counts in my mind as marketing, and I think it's by far better for you guys because it demonstrates it in their backyard as opposed to, in principle, this works because it works in New York, and maybe it would work here in Arkansas.
I found that most districts that I talk to don't care about any program you're running outside of their state. Every state is its individual silo. So yeah, I have programs in Texas. Do people in Louisiana, even though it's right next door, care about that? Absolutely not. And so getting that first one in a state and making sure that everybody, even at the state level, is on board with it is absolutely the key. It's hard to get the first one, but once you said like prove the concept, then there's your marketing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think there's also this principle that I don't know, I find sometimes often is inaccurate, and that's that everybody thinks that their situation is unique, no matter what situation they're in. Every school district, every program, every city, they're all like, oh, it's very different here because we're rural and poor, or because we're rural and wealthy, which is a different mix. And it's like, yeah, nope, it's the same. I've done that 8 times. I've done that one 12, but I've done this one 8 times. It doesn't matter. It's still, everyone feels like it's completely unique until they see something that directly applies to them.
I figured out a theory on that. You were talking about special education director being a really tough job. There's only one per district. So they exist in their own little silos. So a lot of times, other than when they're at conferences or this or that, they don't really realize that so many people are in the same situation as them. It feels very different. But in reality, if you take somebody from a 5,000 person rural district, rural poverty district, it doesn't matter if they're in West Virginia, if they're in Alabama, if they're in Texas, it really doesn't matter.
Exactly. They have the same set of challenges, the same set of headaches and frustrations. Makes complete sense. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Taylor. Hopefully, this gets the message out a little bit more about partnerships like yours that local districts can use.
Absolutely. Happy to be on. And I'd love to come back at any time that you need me in the future.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much.